My name is Tanya, and I also work at BCIT SA Entrepreneurship. So let me quickly introduce our guests. We're so excited to have Adam Wicks from Wicks Electrical, and they are actually the most reviewed electrical contractor in BC, which is a huge accomplishment. So we're so glad he can join us. And then Chad is a very popular trades instructor at BCIT since 2009. So we're so glad he could join us as well today. So they will be answering your questions. So welcome, Adam and Chad.
Thanks so much for
having us.
Chad,
yes,
nice to hear your voice.
Yeah, you too, Adam. Good seeing you, buddy.
Yeah, you too, man.
Yeah, so we want to ask you, so you can do it best. You can give a brief introduction of your experience in the trades and entrepreneurship. So I want to ask you, Adam, would you go first for us, just to introduce yourself?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, my name's Adam Wicks. I'm the founder of Wicks Electric. Been running Wicks Electric for 7 years now. I started just on my own doing service calls and small jobs. I built it up to about a 16 electrician team right now. And I dabble in some other entrepreneurial activities. I've started a health supplement company. I've recently got my real estate license. I'm going to be getting into some development stuff. So I'm dabbling a little bit, but my main focus, my baby, is Wicks Electric, and that's it's a team of electricians that I run.
Thank you, Adam. Chad, you're next.
Awesome. My name's Chad Flynn. I am an electrical instructor at BCIT, and I've been teaching there since 2009. And I also teach over at the School of Business. So I teach an Entrepreneurship for Trades course, as well as I teach in the marketing program there in the evenings as well.
Great, thank you both for giving us an introduction there. So my first question for you both is, how important was your education to help you to become a successful entrepreneur? Chad, would you like to go first?
Sure. My education it's paramount. You have to have, honestly, if you're going into the trades anyways, you're going to be going through trade school. So that's so very important, is get your ticket. And I can't stress that enough. You cannot be a good licensed contractor without getting your ticket, especially you electricians out there. You got to get your red seal. You've got to get your FSR. You've got to get your licensed contracting. So education never ends is one thing that I always say, because what happens is you're going to go through BCIT, you're going to get your trade. And then after that, you're going to want to go, if you're looking at pursuing your own business, you're going to have to get your FSR. So, or some sort of certification that way. So you're going to be taking other courses. So my big thing is I would never, ever look at education as a hoop to jump through. And I know a lot of people do that, especially in trade school. They always talk about, well, just finish up and get it over with and all that. The way I saw my education was I saw it as a chance to meet people who are like-minded and to network. I've got friends that I'm still friends with from way back when I did my first year electrical. So that was over 20 years ago now. So education is so important. And then beyond that, like if you're thinking about going into university or going on for that other courses, and I just look at my trade was always a stepping stone to other things. So I'm just finishing up a master's right now, and that was strictly because of my trade and all that sort of thing. So, and all this kind of leads into all my business sense as well, because I took courses off and on throughout the whole time that I was in business myself, and which is what led me to actually starting to teach it as well. So never ever say that your education is done. That would be my number one thing that I would say.
Wow, thank you, Chad. Adam, how about you?
Yeah, I would echo that. Education is super important. And I love the thought that it really doesn't end. After you get your ticket, you move on, like Chad said. You're going to want to get your FSR. And as you proceed, there's going to be so many other avenues you're going to want to learn, whether that's going down leadership or marketing or specialized trades. You might get into solar or EV or renewable energy or anything like that. Life is just a continuous pattern of school, of learning, of getting better, of improving and growing. So I think especially learning the good habits while you're in getting your certification, whether that's a degree or a trade certificate or whatever it is, it's super important to focus and learn the skills to learn and to continue to let those skills allow you to learn efficiently and effectively throughout life. It's not just going to be one and done. You're not just going to finish your certification or your trades qualification. It's going to be a continuous learning period, whether you get into entrepreneurship or not. And I'd also echo what Chad said about, making lifelong friends who, share your career path or your values and the things that are important to you. I've established many good friendships from first, second, third, and fourth year electrical as well.
Wow, that's great. That's a very strong yes for education, and continuing it. So a lot of people, when they, are getting close to finishing their studies or they just finished up, they're so ready to get going and starting their own business. So do you recommend starting your own business right after graduating, or would you recommend that they first work for an established company to get some experience before they start? Adam, can I start with you?
Of course, yeah. I would say neither and both. I would say it's about self-awareness. It's about what makes you feel excited and maybe a little scared, but mainly excited. Because if you feel like you're the kind of person that needs more experience in a company and to learn the skills, then if you go in and you don't proceed that way and you start a company, you're going to be operating from a place of fear instead of excitement. So you need to know yourself. You need to know if you want to bank those a couple years, bank hours, and then start the company, that might be a better bet. If you're speaking to me personally, I believe I'm an entrepreneur through and through, and I need to get out there and start my company right away. So I jumped into it. On the other side of the coin, I've had several friends who did the opposite. They spent 4, 6, 10 years with a company and then started and were extremely successful. They felt like they wanted to learn all the things first and then go in and start their own company second. So just, I think, depends on the personality, and self-awareness is huge on that.
Okay. I want to ask you about that, Adam. You mentioned fear, if you feel fear. So from my experience, feeling a little bit of fear is normal. So how would you advise somebody to determine, when it's too extreme to a level that maybe they should pursue working for someone else first, or how they can know that it's a normal fear and they should just push through it?
Yeah, I would say sit with the thought of being on your own with no job and no guaranteed income, and think about what's about to present itself on your path of entrepreneurship. It's all on you. You can, accomplish all the marketing and get work. If you have the right contacts, you could already have some work, so you could be generating some revenue. And just think about the path that sits in front of you, and I would just go into that, spend some quiet time in solitude, and just think, does that make you excited? You're like, yeah, let's go. Or does that make you kind of want to pump the brakes? And then again, it's a self-awareness and emotional intelligence thing that the decision needs to be made. And if you make the decision maybe to go and work for 6 months or a year, like maybe you go back for 2 months and you change your mind. You also have to let yourself change your mind. You don't need to just make the decision right now, I'm starting my own business and that's that. Maybe you start by incorporating and starting to build a brand while you're still working with the company, and you do work after hours, making sure that, of course, is going to work out with the company you're working with. That's actually what I did when I was in just finished my 4th year and got my ticket. I wasn't quite ready to make the jump. So the employer I was with let me work part-time and do side work and start accumulating clientele. So yeah.
That's great. Thank you. That's a very good customized answer. Chad, how about you? Do you recommend somebody start out, or should they work for somebody else first?
Well, I'm going to go back and do exactly what Adam did. I'm going to echo everything he said. I could not agree more. It totally depends on your personality type. Sometimes there's going to be those that are just really comfortable with the idea of taking the risk and doing the jumps. And other times you're going to want to take the time to do the research. And I just want to hone in on one thing that Adam said that I think is so very important, is that self-awareness. You need to take time to get to know yourself. And I know it might sound a little frou-frou, and I think you got the two wrong guys on if you were thinking that you weren't going to get any frou-frou stuff, because I know Adam, like me, is much into like the very much self-awareness, self-help, that sort of stuff. And I'm sure that will come up later on when we talk. But you have to understand where you're coming from, and you need to listen to your body and listen to how you feel about these things. And like he was saying, you need to sit and take some time in solitude and feel if it's right. And I think there's a lot of power in that. And in this day and age, when everything's happening so fast around us and we've got all this media coming at us all the time, we don't take those times to be quiet and reflect. And we don't take those times to listen to ourselves. And so we need to take those times to just sit in it and say, okay, does this feel right, or does this feel not right now? And so it might, just because it doesn't feel right at the moment doesn't mean you'll never do it. It just means that at this moment, maybe you need to take a beat and you need to get as much information and as much education as you can from where you're working. And then maybe that it all happens for a reason. In my experience, every time that I've listened to my intuition and gone with my, I hesitate to say gut, but when I listen to that intuition, it works out. Like there's something out there that you know intuitively inside whether it's a good idea or not. So I really would suggest that, just like Adam said, it's not going to be a yes, you should do it right away, or yes, you should wait. It totally depends on the person, but it depends on you knowing yourself and knowing where you're at.
Yeah.
Wow, that's so amazing that you both touched on that. I think that's a point that a lot of people miss. And it kind of brings me into the next question, which is, what are one or two important realities of entrepreneurship in general that you would want a new founder to know before they start out?
Yeah.
Chad, can I ask you to go first?
I think when you're first starting out, you really got to hone in on who your target market is, because you're going to have these big ideas that you want to, especially when we're talking about trades, you're going to want to get into the service industry or construction. So you want to think that absolutely everybody is going to be your client, but you can't afford that. Like you can't afford to do the marketing to everybody. You can't afford to even get all that work. So what you need to do is start out with what we call a starter market. You start small, you niche in, and then you kind of build out. Like I had a time where I was doing nothing but basement renovations, and in fact, doing nothing but basement suite renovations in a specific area in Clayton Heights. And I was making great money doing that. And I was working nonstop. I was working like 7 days a week because I niched right into that market, right? So I was an electrician that did nothing but basement suites and made really good money doing it. So
the basement suite
there.
niche.
And, it's a huge niche, right?
Yeah,
So,
for sure.
That's what my number one suggestion is definitely find a niche that you can get into to get started. And like Adam said too, like, you don't have to jump in right away. You could be doing it as a side job and build your business from there. And a great way to do that is to find a niche market and kind of expand from there. And then you can start getting known and your name gets out there and you kind of grow. And I think that's somehow like what Adam, at your company is, you started small and then you've kind of been growing it right from there. Because of that word of mouth, you do good work. People start appreciating it. You get testimonials. You'll build on that and away you go. So just because you're starting small doesn't mean you stay small.
Yeah, absolutely. And you guys are going to get used to this. Me and Chad tend to agree with each other a lot. We've been on a few panels together. And I think every time we're on a panel, we are the two that kind of agree and see eye to eye. So we're not just echoing each other for fun. We really do agree on a lot of these concepts, which I think is awesome.
Yeah, but you know what they say, success leaves clues. And, you know, it is a small community too as well, like for people that really excel. So it's so great that, you know, you have shared mindsets about things. Adam, do you want to add anything onto what Chad said or expand on that more?
I will add on, and then I'll also add a separate point. Just to Chad's point, like picking a niche and something you want to really focus in and master, I think is important. But then on the other side of that same coin, it's the ability to pivot. So if you're doing basement suites and you do an amazing job and you've done 5 or 6 and it's going really well, an opportunity might float in that you can do maybe an 8-unit low rise, let's say. And as long as you have the manpower and you're set up to do it, be ready to pivot and go in the direction that you're comfortable with, of course. And that's happened to us. This one project, I think it was a main floor kitchen renovation, and that homeowner referred us to one of their best friends who owned a then to be 20,000 square foot audiovisual shop. And that was kind of the job that took us from 2 to 6 full-time electricians. So I would just say the importance of knowing how to pivot, if that's the direction that you want to go. I think it's a good skill to have. The other recommendation I'd make is, and again, this you can pivot on, but I would say creating some kind of a roadmap of where you want to be in the next 3 years, how the systems look, who is in the field, who reports to who does the estimating, do you have an administrator, kind of all those sorts of things. I feel like when you put pen to paper and you can actually visually write how you see the company expanding, and you can choose a year, you could choose 5 years, but as long as you're getting pen to paper and you're drawing out, and when you do that, you're saying who reports to who, and kind of like you want a roadmap of the company. I think it's really important to have that vision. I'm a very picture-oriented person. I like to see the way that things should look on paper and to draw it out. So that helps me kind of plan and make decisions accordingly.
Great. Thank you, Adam. That's great advice. So can you give an example of a challenge you faced when you first started out? And then if you have any advice on how somebody can avoid it or then deal with it if it happens to them?
Yeah,
I don't know.
absolutely.
Adam, do you want to go
Adam.
first?
I'm big
Adam,
on the
okay, Adam,
challenges.
it's you.
Lots of challenges. You guys are going to be here all afternoon. No, I'd say one of the big challenges we face early on, and it's a hard one to avoid, but I think there's many important lessons in it rather, is one of our main contractors bankrupted. They had promised us, we were around 6 electricians in the field at the time. We were just gaining momentum. Everything was going right. And then that happened. So I would say in entrepreneurship, things can absolutely start going super well, and you can kind of get your head in the clouds because you're like, this is just like feel. And don't get me wrong, some things feel very difficult, but sometimes like, man, everything's just flowing. This is great. What I've learned in the 7 years I've been in business is when that feeling is there, make sure you kind of just plant your feet and go, okay, what could go wrong right now? And make sure you're not overextended. And our issue was, I think 70% of our business was with that contractor. And so if I had that foresight, what I would have done is seeked out a couple other builders to spread us around. So we're not more than, honestly, I'd say like ideally 30% of your business shouldn't be with more than one, or with one person rather. You want to spread that out. That way, if something goes wrong, you never know what the internal dynamics of another company are. If something goes wrong with that company, that way it's not going to affect your business in the way that it at the time affected us.
That's smart advice. Thank you, Adam.
Yeah.
Chad.
Mine was, it's very similar to that. It's basically, you don't know what you don't know. So when I first started, I got a contract to go up north and work in the oil sands. So I got my truck all suited up, ready to go, drove up there, drove 17 hours up to Fort McMurray, drove out to the site, Syncrude, was going to get on site. And when I got up to the gate, they asked to see my wellhead insurance. And I'd never even heard of wellhead insurance. And so they wouldn't let me on site. So then I had to spend a couple days in Fort McMurray, not making any money, running around trying to find a broker to get this wellhead insurance, go through the application process, get it all in place. And what I found there is I didn't do the research. And so if depending on the kind of work you're looking at getting into, you have to do the research, and you've got to talk to people that are doing it and find out. Had I made a couple phone calls before I left the Vancouver area to find out what exactly do I need for insurances, bonding, and all that good fun paperwork stuff, I would have saved myself a couple of days of work. So it was an immense waste of time that could have been overlooked had I actually done some research. So that's one of the challenges that I faced. I mean, like Adam said, I could go on all afternoon with other challenges and mistakes I've made, but we don't need to go into all that.
Wow.
Yeah.
But it just shows you what a huge role does proactive planning play.
Mm-hmm.
You know, those little things you don't anticipate them. Try to.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the next question is about money. So when you first started out, did you need financing for your business? And if you did, how difficult or easy was it for you to get the necessary funding?
I start with one of the first times that I did go out on my own. I luckily did do the research on this. I knew that I had a good contract lined up, but I also knew that they had net 90-day terms, which meant that I wasn't going to see any money for 3 months. So I had to make sure that I had my nut covered, and I had everything. I had all the money in the account that could cover me for 3 months before I'd start seeing the money come in. So while I didn't need the money there, I did have to make sure that I had a line of credit just ready to kind of roll over and help me through those times, and then pay it off as soon as I possibly could. So at the same time, I've also had businesses where I've just started, like the first business I ever had, I just started with side jobs and built from there. And so I didn't require the financing. So there are different avenues to take. If you can do it without having to go for the big financing, that's all the better for you. But there's going to be times where you need to borrow money. So you just have to do it wisely. And it's not to, buy a big, huge, fancy truck with big, huge motor tires on it and that sort of thing. That's not the sort of thing that you want to be. Sorry, Adam.
Adam, how about you? What was your experience?
Yeah, I'm going to just lean again on self-awareness a little bit, because me personally, I was okay going out there when I first started with next to nothing in the bank, because I had met with other entrepreneurs and owners, and I knew that there was a pretty decent rate of getting deposits accepted. So I knew that I'd be getting deposits before the project started for some of the bigger ones. On the smaller jobs out of the gate, I knew I'd get paid right away. I operate out of the back of my Jeep. And like to echo Chad, it's like, yeah, if I wanted, which I don't recommend, a huge truck or even like a Sprinter van right out of the gate, you might need some financing. But I didn't want anyone else to have the leverage, like I didn't get into entrepreneurship so people could have leverage over me, and I don't want to owe anyone money. I just wanted to keep it simple. There's no rush. I was 22 years old, so I just started out of the back of my Jeep. I didn't have all the tools I necessarily needed. I bought them along the way, but I didn't overextend myself. I kept it simple. I worked hard. I saved up. When I had the money, I got a kind of a beater van, and then eventually I upgraded the vans, and now we have a whole fleet of vans, and I've never borrowed a dollar. What I will say is, just so everybody knows, is when you start a company, the banks want to see 2 years of financials through the business before they talk about giving you a credit card. So you may need to get a cosign even to get a couple thousand, which is crucial, because if you want to be purchasing material and putting it on the credit cards, you kind of need a credit card. Yeah, but as far as borrowing, I mean, I would try to limit it, as Chad said. You don't need to owe anybody money. 90-day terms, those are pretty rare these days. The most we see is 30 to 45, but those terms do still exist. So just be selective, try to get deposits, try to stay cash healthy. It's super important for both your business and your mindset.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. That's a really good overview. Yes, Chad, please add.
I just want to say too, like what Adam was talking about earlier about having a plan for your business. So some people might even go as far as to give it that it's a business plan. And in your business plan, if you want to do an official business plan, one of the things that you go through is a cash flow projection. And in a cash flow projection, you work out what your door opening costs are. So how much money you need to take your business to day one of opening the doors. And then you need to work out what your working capital requirements are. And if you can get that all figured out, then you have a good idea of how much money you need to have in the bank to carry you. So then you can start saving. Like I've had a student in my Entrepreneurship and Trades course who, when he went through the cash flow projection, discovered that he needed all in about $150,000. He was a genset mechanic, so he had to buy all the tie-in stuff. So he just decided to wait. And like Adam, what you said, I loved it. It's not a race. Like it's not a hurry. Like it's a marathon. Like you don't have to like get out of the gate and go running like crazy. So Peter just saved money for 3 years, and now he's off and running, doing really well in Calgary. So take your time, do the research. It's not a race. Yeah,
absolutely. And on that note, like right now, we're of course referring to when you first start out, and you literally, it's you, maybe one other guy. I mean, right now, we're a $2 million a year company at the moment, and things can get overextended. There are 30 to 60 day terms on invoices, and our payroll's 35 to 40 grand every 2 weeks. So now I do have a pretty massive line of credit. It's not really tapped into, but it's there. So when you need it and you have the credit, I mean, absolutely borrow money, get it as low interest as you can, but don't go into debt to start the company and to buy fancy tools you don't quite need yet, is my advice anyway.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's great advice. Thank you both. One of the things that you mentioned brought up a question for one of the students. They ask, the very first business, the first client is always the hardest one, to get the buy-in for your services. How did you get your first business or clients?
I'll start. I was going old school at the time. I was printing out flyers and making pull tabs was my initial marketing strategy, with a little cartoon electrician on the front. But I think the more important thing I did, this was like 2011, 2012, was I phoned every friend of a friend, parents, friends, cousins, uncles, aunts, and just let them know I'd started a company. And if anyone in your network needs electrical, like, please give me a shout, consider us. And that drummed up more business than you might think.
Wow, that's excellent idea.
I did the same thing, but that was back in the day. Like when I first got started, there was no social media. So I've tried this out, getting onto Facebook groups and like communities. Like if you're just getting started, and say you live in like in the community in Surrey, Clayton, I keep using that as an example because I've used it before. You start going into the community groups, and somebody's always looking for your trade. Does anybody know a plumber? Does anybody know an electrician? And you kind of stalk those groups, and as soon as somebody says that, you jump into there, you send them a DM, and you will get work that way. Like eventually somebody's going to get there, and then you can start kind of building your clientele and working in your geographic area. So yeah, Facebook groups are a great way to get started.
Yeah, that's huge. Yeah. Another awesome avenue for trades, especially, is an association like Haven, the Home Builders Association, or an accreditation like the Better Business Bureau. Having both those stamps and being part of those groups builds a huge amount of credibility, and also leads into many referrals that were very valuable in building the company, in my experience.
Thank you. And then bringing us back to the present. So maybe if somebody's watching and they've already started out, it could be inspiring for them to know what you've done to adapt to the COVID-19 circumstances in terms of, marketing, operations. Adam, do you want to go first?
Yeah, absolutely. We built a pretty strong community behind the business. So one of the first things we did was we sent a educational newsletter. I'm an advocate of podcasts. I'm sure we'll talk about that in a little bit. And reading and just education in general. I just think it's so important to always be learning. So we sent a newsletter out educating our community on just some tips of COVID, the best resources that we found, and things that we were finding very useful. On the business side, we leaned up quite a bit. I actually left the office we were in. I set my team up from home, and I just generally made sure everybody felt supported and safe. And a large portion of our field team at first, especially during the initial scare, they weren't comfortable in the field, so they were on EI. But we just got lean and just increased communication and just made sure everybody was on the same page, and made sure our clients also knew through newsletter correspondence and phone calls that if we were coming with masks and gloves and all the safety precautions.
Mm-hmm.
Good. Thank you, Adam. Chad, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, so I don't have a business in play right now because I'm teaching full time, but I have a lot of friends and a lot of former students. And I think what Adam just said and what he does very well with Electric just in total anyways, is communication. So like he said, everybody went lean. So all these friends of mine and these former students, they all took their businesses and they had to cut and lean up. And some of them gave up their office spaces. They had co-working spaces they weren't using anymore. And then they just stay in contact. And so they're constantly in contact with their clients. Some of their clients are having to hold off on business right now, but at least they're in contact with them. So when time does come to get back into business, that they know they exist and that they know that they're there for them. So, I loved the idea of what Adam's saying too, like having his protocols in place and sharing them with the clients. Like that's so important, especially now that everybody's kind of freaked out about having anybody near their house. So knowing that people are coming in with masks and gloves, and that puts everybody's mind at ease, because at the end of the day, pandemic or not, people are going to have things break and you're going to need a tradesperson in your house. So you need to let people know. I think it's a great opportunity to market yourself as a COVID-friendly contractor. And so people, we're all living in anxiety anyways. Why should they be anxious about having a tradesperson come into their house? Why not let people know that you are that safe person?
Yeah, and just on that point, we leaned up on several items, but marketing was not one of them. We tripled down on marketing. I doubled my ad spend budget. I hired someone that was going to actually monitor and manage our SEO and cost per click management. And then we actually touched base with probably 400 contractors that we've worked with over the past, well, not all 400 we work with, but 400 in total, I think was the number, around 100 that we've worked with that we haven't seen for a minute. And we just reached out and just checked in to see how everyone was doing. And to Chad's point, let them know that we are a COVID friendly contractor and we're still operating and are here if you need us.
That's interesting to hear. Thank you for sharing that. Definitely helpful advice. So I want to ask you next about having a mentor. So how important do you think is it for entrepreneur in the trades to have access to a mentor? And have you had one yourself? Chad, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of mentorship. I think it's so very important. Apprenticeship is based on the principles of mentorship, right? So the hard part is finding one. And so you just gotta, it's hard to find that relationship. when you have like people try to set up intentional mentor-mentee approaches, it doesn't always work because personalities don't always fit. But if you find somebody that you resonate with and that you can reach out to and just start talking to, and you don't even have to freak people out by saying, can you be my mentor? You can just start asking questions, right? And reaching out to them. I was very, very lucky in the sense that my old employer was a mentor to me. So when I decided to go out on my own, he gave me his blessing. And to this day, like, he's one of those people that, not even with work-related items, any kind of related items, I'm always in contact with him about. So these are the things that mentorships lead to other things. So if you can find a mentor, or there's somebody in your life that you look at as a mentor, definitely foster that relationship. It is so very important.
Yeah. And that mentor doesn't need to be an entrepreneur necessarily. People from different walks of life have a ton of experience to share with you, and you will most likely, I have in my experience, learned a ton from people who aren't necessarily entrepreneurs, but they're doctors, lawyers, or any it can be anything, but they've showed me meticulous work and how to just be present with the task at hand. And that, of course, feeds right into entrepreneurship in so many different ways. And I just had a little laugh because I've actually I've asked early on for people whom I wanted to be my mentor to be my mentor. And yeah, just don't use the word mentor. It'll naturally happen. Like Chad said, if you reach out to somebody and just start jamming and building rapport and building a relationship, that'll naturally turn into a mentor-mentee relationship. But I find if you're like, hey, you're awesome, I really love what you've done, will you be my mentor? It almost seems like that's going to be like a job for them, instead of just naturally coming to fruition through communication. But yes, mentorship, I agree, is so important. And like Chad said, in trades, the trades model is built with apprentices as a mentor-mentee relationship. I personally found my mentors through two different groups. One was BNI, which is a networking group that I joined pretty early on. That was just full of very like-minded entrepreneur, hardworking folks, and I still keep in touch with many of the folks from there. A lot of those guys and gals became mentors of mine in one way or another. A few years back, I joined a different organization called EO, which is Entrepreneur Organization, and same thing. I mean, just so many amazing business builders and entrepreneurs in that group, and yeah, just I feel very grateful to call several of those mentors. One officially, actually, I have a mentor-mentee actual program, so I have one official mentor that we call a mentor, and then dozens of others who act as mentors, and kind of like my personal board of advisors. Whenever I have issues, I'll reach out to them and they're there. But yeah, very, very important for sure to have a mentor. And what I will say is every one of my mentors has mentors, and their mentors have mentors, so it doesn't really ever stop.
Wonderful. That was the answer I was hoping for. At the Student Association, we have a mentorship program as well. So if somebody struggles to maybe just open that conversation naturally with somebody, come see us. We can help you. Yes, so Adam, you mentioned you love podcasts, reading. Chad, I know you're a huge creator of content yourself. So the next questions, are there any resources that you would recommend to trade students who want to start a business? And this can be anything. It can be a blog, a podcast, or whatever you think is a good recommendation. Adam, do you want to start?
Yeah, totally. I think I'm synonymous with podcasts. I've been talking about podcasts for 10 years before they were super in the mainstream, but there's just something about listening to a conversation between two people, and it's just the ease of listening and what comes out in some of these podcasts, the insights that you can gain, for me, have been life-changing. I've also used them as segues and introductions to books, to practices, to martial arts, to maybe a specific workout routine, to someone that I'll start following who I look, even though they don't know me at this point, I still view them as a mentor because I follow them and I learn from what they do and what they write and what they speak about. And a lot of the things that I've learned that have really helped in my life with business, things like meditation, certain fitness regimens, how important it is to get your mind, body, spirit, soul all aligned so you can be the most potent version of yourself. And figuring out how to do that has come as a direct result of listening to podcasts. Books are the same thing. I mean, I love a book. It's nice to just shut in my experience, shut all technology off and just read a book and just make notes. I wrote down here just on that question, I think it's also really important to not only read self-development books, entrepreneurship books, like read things about all kinds of things, about art, about war, about love, about spirituality, and you'll never know what couple sentences are going to completely change the trajectory of your life in a book. I think it's happened many times over to me. And sometimes when I go looking for a specific book, building businesses for dummies or whatever you're trying to figure out, it's actually from the other books that I get the information that I was seeking. So I would just keep it vast, read everything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Adam. Chad.
Yeah, I'm the same way as Adam. I'm voracious into podcasts. I can't get enough of them. And same thing with reading. And I find now I have 4 kids, so I'm really busy. Podcasts and audiobooks I'm finding very, very useful because I can hop into the car. I mean, my commute isn't that long right now because I'm going from upstairs to downstairs. But back in the day, when I was driving, I would throw on an audiobook. And so there's no excuse not to read books anymore because you can get almost everything off Audible or some sort of audiobook. Some of the ones, and I actually pulled them off my shelf that I recommend. I'm going to go and kind of give some ones that I think are awesome for trades. I got this one here, which is The E-Myth Contractor. Great book. It's the E-Myth is this whole brand, but they've got it's a really small book that takes through a trades business. This one here, The Personal MBA, is fantastic. It's just deep and in depth and so much good stuff and really accessible. Like Adam, I'm totally into like the spirituality, self-help, meditation, all that sort of stuff. This book has been really good this year. Get it from the camera. Atomic Habits.
Nice.
It's a fantastic book by James Clear. And then some of the podcasts I've been listening to, I highly recommend. And I like what Adam said too. Make sure you're listening to all sorts of different things. Tim Ferriss, the Tim Ferriss Show. He's got so many different guests from so many different stages of life and parts of like disciplines. And they've all got great insight to bring. So I highly recommend his podcast, The Tim Ferriss Show. And then another one, Seth Godin, his Akimbo Show. I mean, I could listen to that guy talk about paint dry, but when he gets into kind of marketing ideas and business ideas, he's a marketing guru. Like most marketing specialists will always talk about Seth Godin. So you talk to him, he's kind of like that uncle that you wish you always had around that you could ask questions to.
Totally.
So, I mean, and I could go huge list of podcasts. Those are the 2 I would highly recommend.
Yeah, what's Seth Godin's recent book that he finished about marketing? I forget what it's called.
Oh,
he's got a couple. If you just search up Seth Godin's most popular entrepreneurship books, there's 1 or 2, and they're both fantastic. It's just I'm blanking at the moment. The other one I'd recommend, specifically for entrepreneurship, one is called the MF CEO. That's with Andy Frisella. It's a great podcast. Yeah, he's awesome. And then, of course, like if you're listening to this, is 99% likely Gary Vaynerchuk, the Gary V Show. But he's an entrepreneur that, he's awesome. I mean, he just comes with empathy and self-awareness and all these traits that are so important in business. And I just think the way he delivers content is so enjoyable to listen to. He's got a show right now through COVID called Tea with Gary V, and he just takes callers and deals with their questions and their concerns. And it's been really, really good. So I'd definitely check that out if you haven't. Recent book that I just finished that's sort of changed my morning routine up was the 5 a.m. Club by Robin Sharma, and that's been a really great book. So I would totally recommend getting that one. Figuring out your morning routine is one of the most important things you can do in business. 100%. Yeah.
Changed my life. There's a book called The Miracle Morning, which is very similar, and it talks about that morning routine. Once you get that locked in, it changes everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nice. Well, thank you for sharing those resources. What we plan to do is we're going to email everybody that attended with the link to the video. And I'll also place links there to these books and resources and podcasts that they mentioned so that it's very easy to find them.
Great. I would just say one thing. Sorry, Tanya. I would say as well, if you can add Tools of Titans to that list.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Ferriss's book. That's a very good
Tim
one.
Ferriss,
and we actually have it in the BCIT library, so people can take it out if they don't want to purchase it.
Perfect.
Yeah, so we're getting ready to wrap up. It's been amazing speaking to you both. My last question for each of you is there any final words of wisdom, maybe something we didn't ask you that you think is important for somebody just starting out to know, or any last thoughts to close up our session together today? Um, I don't think I'll put the spot on either one of you. I'll let you volunteer who wants to go first.
Yeah, I mean, I think something we haven't talked about yet is failures. And this is something that
Mhm.
comes up very often in the ecosystem of entrepreneurship. And it's talked about a lot, and I'm sure many people listening have heard about it, but to really get in the mindset, and it's beneficial in all forms of life, not just business, but to get in the mindset where you look at failures, like let yourself, you know, mourn over it for an hour or two, but getting to the point that you really look at each failure as a little gift, because literally in every failure there's a reason that failure happened, and there's always a learning lesson in that failure. So
Mhm.
if you set out ready to fail, like not of course wanting or expecting to it, but being ready to fail, and then being ready to take those failures, really look at them, spend some time thinking about it, and then figuring out how you've learned from it. So what I've tried to do in my business is whenever we fail as a team or I fail as a boss or whatever might happen, I don't just tuck it under the rug and ignore it. We dissect it, we look at it, we say, okay, what did we learn? What systems are we implementing to grow? How are we going to make sure that we negate this from happening again in the future? So I just think that whole idea is really important in business.
Mhm.
I'm so glad you brought it up. Thank you, Adam.
Yeah.
Chad, how
Yeah,
about
I
you?
would say for me, like my parting words would be use the resources that you have available to you. And so, like if you're a BCIT student, reach out to the BCIT Student Association and this like programs like the Be a Boss program, like what we're part of right now. I mean, Laura and Tanya are fantastic and an amazing resource. So you should be using them because they've got such great ideas and such great empathy, and they honestly 100% want to make sure that you succeed. So use that. And also, BCIT has a ton of business courses out there that are part-time studies, so that you don't need to, enroll in a business program. There is an entrepreneurship for trades course. There's marketing plan courses that you can take in the evening or online now. There's plans on courses on building a business plan. So these are things that are really, really important and are all done part-time. So you don't have to sit there and think, oh, I guess I better go get a business degree. You don't. You can actually get in there, learn what you need to, and move on to the next step. So use the resources you have available to you. And BCIT's got it's such an awesome school. And I don't say that just because I graduated there and work there now, but it's such a great resource. So, use what you got available.
Great. Thank you so
Yeah.
much, Chad, and thank you so much, Adam.
I would
It's been
also just
amazing spending.
add,
Oh, yes,
sorry,
please
Tanya,
do.
don't want to cut you off, but I just think like the concept of, and this is something we've been talking about in EO quite a bit, is just becoming a master whatever you're doing. Making sure, especially in business, when you're first starting out, that every transaction and every situation that you're a part of, whether that's a phone call with a client or a service call or it's a huge renovation, just trying to get as close to mastery without being obsessive, but just be present and just do a great job on every small task, and you'll be amazed at what those perfected
Yeah.
small tasks build in the end. It's like the grouse grind. When you look up at the top of the mountain, it's daunting, but when you just look step by step and just, hey, make that a quality step, tense your core, have good posture, be present with the situation, and just step by step, before you know, you're at the top. And you're not at the top from sloppy steps and falling and scraping. You took your time, you enjoyed the process, you were present, you did a great job. And by the time you're at the top, you can look down and be proud of what you've done. And just that whole concept we talked about, like, don't rush, take it slow, and just really enjoy the process, and just figuring out how you can be as present as possible with the process. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Chad, any last thoughts?
Oh, what he said.
Perfect.
Love you,
Well,
Chad.
thank you both
Hey,
so
buddy.
much. Basic summary of the last minute golden wisdom is expect failure, it's okay, adapt, try and do the best job you can in small steps, and then use the support that's available to you. So Chad, Adam, that's it for our time together today. Thank you again so much. We really appreciate you both. We know you are both very busy. And we hope to connect with you very soon. And then for the students who are watching, we hope you found that very helpful. We will be sending you the link very soon with the video so that you can rewatch parts you want to see again, along with those links that I promised to the resources. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and do connect with us if any other questions come up for you as you take time to reflect on our time together.
Cool. Thanks, Tanya.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah,
Okay.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Pleasure, guys. See ya.